Fiona. I would rather gouge out my eyes with a dirt-covered Barbie than get stuck in a tiny, cramped alcove with the most attractive doctor in the entire hospital. Unfortunately, I wasn't given the choice. I walked down a quiet, abandoned hospital hallway at the end of a late shift, my comfortable shoes squeaking over freshly polished linoleum with each step, feeling exhausted and looking forward to hitting my bed so hard it broke, when a hand shot out from behind a pair of double doors and yanked me to the side. I stumbled and nearly screamed, but a rough hand pressed itself over my mouth. I turned, ready to kick whoever had the audacity to touch me like that directly in his or her private parts, so hard their parents felt it when I met Dean's eyes. Something about his gaze made me stop. So instead of making sure he'd never have children, I bit his finger. His skin tasted like salt and soap. He grunted and hissed, but didn't move. "Stop," he whispered. "I'll move my hand, just don't be loud." I clenched my jaw harder, and he sucked in a breath, then dropped his palm away. I bared my teeth, ready to lay into him, but stopped myself. He looked anxious, extremely anxious, and I'd never seen him sweat before since he first joined Mercy General. We were crammed together in a tight closet where they kept extra face masks and rubber gloves, the white and blue boxes stacked like bricks on a metal wire rack. Dean stood next to the open doorway, eyes wide, and he jerked his chin toward me. I got the hint and stepped out of the way. "What the fuck, Dean?" I whispered, not sure why the hell I was going along with this insanity. Dean was a young, handsome neurologist, and one of the more serious people I'd met at Mercy General, which, despite being a hospital, was packed with some of the most insane humans I'd ever seen in my life. He nodded toward the doorway and held a finger to his mouth, then cupped his head. I understood what he was pantomiming, although I hated playing charades, and leaned toward the opening, listening. I didn't hear anything at first, but then the sound of a conversation drifted over toward us. I couldn't make it out at first. I caught tones, mostly, and they didn't sound happy. I leaned closer and pressed myself against Dean. He gave me a look, but it wasn't anger, more like he was curious about me. I was tempted to lop off his manhood, but held back, since he'd probably start screaming and give us away. I heard footsteps, and the conversation got closer. I guessed it was happening around the corner, up near the elevators, right where I was headed a minute before. "Not my decision," a masculine voice said. It was low and had a very light South Philly accent, the sort of cliché thing I'd only ever heard in cheese steak shops that catered to tourists. "The boss wants what the boss wants. Tell your boss that he'd better relax a little bit, or else our current situation won't last." That second voice was definitely, without a doubt in my mind, the hospital administrator. Her name was Maria Dickens, and she was an asshole. To be fair, most of the administration were. The hospital was technically a business, and there was a certain line most people shouldn't cross, but the admins were happy to trample all over it. People weren't dollars and cents. Their worth wasn't inherently tied into how much money they made, and yet the admins acted like if someone couldn't pay, then they should be thrown out like trash to die on the street. Maria was one of the worst about it. She seemed to delight in swooping down on unsuspecting patients and telling them that their insurance had lapsed or refused to pay for treatment or any number of tragic, horrible things, and she always did it with a smile. I hated her. Really, really hated her. "I understand that your arrangement with my boss is quite lucrative for you both, but remember who has the power here, Ms. Dickens. And you remember, Mr. Lorenzo, or whatever your name is, that I'm not some pushover mark your boss can strong-arm. I run a major hospital, and I need to be able to plausibly explain why $50,000 suddenly disappeared out the front door. You're a creative woman, Ms. Dickens, so create." I glanced at Dean, and his eyes were wide. He frowned at me, and I suddenly felt how close we were standing. Inches separated our bodies as we both strained to listen to that conversation. My mind raced in a million different directions, trying to understand what the hell was happening. I knew Maria was a callous monster, but I had no clue she was straight-up corrupt on top of that. If she was skimming money from the hospital, that meant she was skimming money from doctors, nurses, and sick people that desperately needed help. Rage bubbled in my gut so hot I could barely hold it back. I took a step toward the door, but Dean put a hand on my hip, almost like he wanted to pull me back. I stopped, surprised at the touch. I thought he'd learned his lesson already, but he didn't yank away. Instead, he stared at me, eyes warning, and I glared back at him. We stood like that, locked in a staring match. It would have been almost hot if I weren't pissed as hell. "I'll see what I can do. For now, please take this small offering to your boss and inform him that the rest will be coming shortly." "Very well. I'll see what he says, but I can't promise anything." More footsteps came, and I stepped back quickly, pressing myself against Dean. I had nowhere else to go since the closet was so tiny and he was in the only good hiding place. I glared at him, aware that my breasts were pressed against his chest and very, very aware that his hands were on my hips like we were slow dancing at junior prom. I clenched my jaw, and I could feel my cheeks turn red, and the smirk he gave me drove me wild. Maria and the guy she spoke with passed by the doorway. Neither looked over, but I caught a glimpse of them. The guy was tall, lanky, with dark hair, a black leather jacket, and a pair of jeans. They disappeared through the doors and were gone. I waited a few seconds, breathing fast, suddenly very aware that Dean was staring down at me with unrestrained joy, or maybe lust, and I pulled back suddenly, stumbling into the racks behind me. He tilted his head. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, steadying the boxes before they could fall and make a racket. "What the hell were you doing in here?" "Getting masks," he said. Then I heard that. "So you stuck around and eavesdropped?" He shrugged. "Frankly, when Maria's talking, I like to listen." "That's really creepy." He gestured toward the door. "And yet you stayed and listened too." I threw my hands up, annoyed. "What was I supposed to do? You practically held me prisoner." "I don't know about that." "You seem to enjoy pressing yourself against me." I gave him my best "your head will explode now" glare and stepped closer to him, but he didn't flinch away. Instead, his smile got larger. I was about to tell him to go shove one of those mask boxes up his rear end when I stopped myself and took a deep breath. Getting pissed at him was fun and whatever, but it was completely beside the point. That overheard conversation ran through my mind again. "What did I miss?" I asked. "From before you nearly ripped my hand off my arm." "Not much. They talked about money, mentioned some program Maria's been running." I frowned and touched my chin. "Program?" "I'm not sure. Some trial, maybe?" They were pretty vague. Didn't sound like a happy conversation. "Who the hell was that guy?" "Your guess is as good as mine." I rolled my eyes. "I bet you think that, Doctor." He laughed. "Oh, come on. We're not all that bad." "Yes, you are." I walked past him and into the hall. He followed, much to my immense pain. "We need to talk about what we're going to do. I don't know about you, but I'm going to tell someone about that. If Maria's stealing from the hospital, someone's got to find out." "I agree, but we can't tell anyone. Not yet." I stopped in front of the elevator doors and turned on him. "Now, why the hell would I keep this to myself?" "Because nobody's going to believe you." I glared at him, heart racing. I was exhausted and emotionally frayed from a difficult day. One of my patients passed away at the opening of my shift, and that set the tone for the rest of the day. It was never easy, losing a patient, and I took it hard every single time, no matter how often it happened, and it happened more than I liked. That was the ugly truth about hospitals. People died here, people died at my place of work, and I had to figure out how to deal with it, or else it would all overwhelm me. So I wasn't being as level-headed and patient as I otherwise would have been. I was a very patient and kind person after all. "How about you fuck yourself, dickwad?" I snapped. He laughed. Don't take it personally. I don't think anyone would believe me either. So then, what do you propose? What we just heard sounded a hell of a lot like some kind of scheme to defraud the hospital, and it sounded like it's been going on for a while. I hesitated, glancing down the halls behind him. How do you know that? The way they talked, like they knew each other. Someone else is involved too, whoever that boss guy is. We need to find out as much as we can before we take this to someone, I scoffed. So you want to play detective? I want to get the facts straight before we run off half-cocked and let Maria lie her way out of this. That won't happen. If she stole money, you heard her. She said she needs to find a reason for it disappearing, which I think means she found other reasons before. I bet they'd go back through the books and find every single dime accounted for, even if those books are built on the backs of a whole lot of falsehoods. I paced back and forth in front of the elevators. This was way too much for me right now, especially considering how I was running on empty and ready to jump off a roof out of sheer exhaustion and mental fog. It didn't help that Dean was the epitome of a know-it-all doctor, so sure of himself, absolutely convinced that he was the smartest person in the room at all times, and that his professional opinion needed to be followed to the letter. He was the kind of doctor that double-checked whatever a nurse was doing, just because he didn't think they could be trusted with even the simplest tasks. I let out an annoyed breath. I knew I wasn't being fair to him. Dean was a very good doctor, and I didn't really know his working habits all that well. I rarely worked with neuro patients, and when I did, he'd been nothing but kind and easygoing. I could feel myself losing it, and needed to get the heck out of there. All right, fine, I said. I'll sleep on it for now. Good, he said, nodding. Are you at the end of a shift? How can you tell? You look tired. I balled up my hands into fists. You're not supposed to tell a lady she looks tired. He held his palms up in surrender. Sorry, I just meant... I know what you meant. I waved him off, calming myself down. It's fine. Don't worry about it. When are you working next? Tomorrow, day shift. All right, I'll find you and we'll talk about what to do, okay? I can do that. Just don't do anything in the meantime. I won't. I need to process whatever the hell we just heard and try to come up with a plan. I sighed and rubbed my eyes, then bashed the elevator call button. Don't even plan. Just wait until we talk again, okay? If that's what you want. I knew he wasn't going to listen, and his little brain was probably already doing mental math. Not that I could blame him. We'd just experienced something pretty crazy together, and the implications were both enormous and horrifying. I glanced back over my shoulder and expected to see him staring out the window or off into space or something, but instead his eyes were on me, locked onto my body. He met my gaze, and a smile broke across his lips, his handsome, full lips, and I took a step back. What? I asked. It was nice being trapped in that closet with you. That's not... What? I blinked rapidly. You and me. In that closet. He tilted his head. I liked having you so close. It was nice, except for when you tried to bite my finger off. I wasn't going to bite it off, I said, shaking my head. And you're not supposed to say that. What? I'm not supposed to like being close to the most attractive nurse on staff. I gaped at him, then snapped my jaw shut and turned my glare back on. That's enough, okay? Don't get any stupid ideas. It was purely business. He laughed and waved as the elevator dinged and the doors slid open, revealing an empty car. Right, sure. Purely business. See you soon, Fiona. I gave him one last, "You're a total bastard" stare, then stepped onto the elevator, banged the button for the ground floor, and watched the doors slide shut. I leaned my head back against the cool metal wall and stared at the ceiling. Something bad was happening in Mercy General, and Maria Dickens was at the heart of it. I didn't know what she was up to, or if I should even get involved, but I knew Dean was going to throw himself directly into the path of that train, whether I wanted him to or not. He was right about one thing, though. I couldn't run off and start telling everyone. I didn't know nearly enough yet, didn't know what the scheme was or who was involved, didn't know anything worth talking about. I'd been a nurse at Mercy for 4 years, but I wasn't exactly important, well-known, or respected. The elevator doors slid open, and I walked through the lobby and out into the city. 2. Dean. The next day was a blur of patience. I kept myself busy, mostly because I knew that the second I slowed down, I'd start thinking about that moment in the closet, and not just what we overheard. Sure, that was pretty messed up, but I couldn't be too surprised. Mercy General was a hotbed of corruption and grift, and the hospital admins tended to be the biggest con men in the whole place, without a doubt in my mind. No, I kept thinking about Fiona, and the way she'd stared at me. Didn't help that my hand hurt from where she'd bitten me. That girl was gorgeous. Long auburn hair, light green eyes, plump pink lips, and a body that drove me wild. I felt it pressed against me when I hid her, and again when I touched her hips, and although she looked at me like she wanted my face to melt off, I still couldn't help myself. She was gorgeous, and I liked that she didn't take any shit. She was famous for that, of course. Fiona was one of the better-known nurses, although I wasn't sure she even realized that. She was highly sought after, and every doctor I knew wanted her working on their patients. I was lucky enough to land her a few times, and each time she lived up to her reputation of being smart, prompt, and on top of everything. And now we had this secret together. It was almost too much. I mean, I'd been admiring her from a distance for a while, and now we were thrust together into that closet by complete chance. It could have been anyone walking past at that exactly moment, and I would have pulled them right in with me. Instead, it was Fiona. I was almost lucky, except I still had a mystery to solve. The next day, I got into work early, did my rounds, then found Fiona sitting behind her nurse's station, idly staring at the monitor like she could barely believe her horrible luck. I leaned over and caught her attention. She sat up straight and stared at me. "Dr. Corse," she said, keeping a straight face. "Nurse Fiona." I grinned and cocked my head. "How's your shift going?" "Just fine." She glanced at the nurse sitting beside her, an older woman named Mary, then back at me. "Can I do something for you?" Mary was studiously ignoring us, while really listening to every single word. That woman was just about the nosiest person in the entire hospital. "Need help getting a line in," I said, "if you wouldn't mind." That would do the rounds soon enough. Hotshot doctor asks nurse for help with a simple procedure. I couldn't wait to hear the comments and get the dirty looks, but it'd be worth it if nobody would suspect anything. Better to hide in plain sight than to try and sneak around. Fiona seemed to understand what I was doing and stood. "I guess I have a minute," she said. "Although you should be able to do this on your own." "Thank you," I said, and walked off with her hot on my heels. I took her down a side hall and into a quiet, abandoned section. I stepped into a dark patient room and walked into the empty space where a bed should have been. Sunlight slanted in sideways through the window, and I looked at the marked white wall, at the plugs where monitors would be placed, and I wondered how many people had come and gone through these walls, how many tragedies and victories this room had seen. Every single room had a story in Mercy, just like in every other hospital, and I was interested in them all. "You know you'll pay for that one later, right?" Fiona frowned at me as she slid the door shut behind her. "I'm aware, but I figure it's better if people gossip about how I can't put in a line without your help. Maybe then they won't notice if we're spending a lot of time together." She put her hands on her hips and tilted her head back. "What makes you think we'll spend any time together at all?" "Because you want to get to the bottom of what we heard as much as I do." She was quiet for a second. I could see her doing the math in her head, trying to decide if it was worth getting involved in all this, or if she should pass it off to me and move on with her life. Except I knew that wasn't a problem at all. Not for someone like her. She couldn't walk away from this any more than I could. How do you think we're going to do that? I'm not sure yet. That's real helpful. I laughed. You told me not to plan. And you listened? She paced across the room, toward the window, and back to the door. I watched her curiously, wondering if she always paced when she was agitated. I'm not stupid enough to ignore a direct order, she snorted. Come on, let's not play that game. What game? The whole, oh, nurses are so important bullshit. We all know what you doctors think. She stared at me, and I saw the unbridled annoyance in her expression. I sighed and ran a hand through my hair. That's not exactly fair. Didn't say it was. Look, not all of us think nurses are useless, you know, and yet you admit that some of you do? I threw up my hands. Of course, there are plenty of doctors in this place that are total fucking assholes, and let me remind you that there are plenty of nurses that are inept morons, too. Plenty of moron doctors. She crossed her arms defiantly. I totally agree. So let's settle this right now. Doctors are assholes and morons, and nurses are also assholes and morons. Maybe now we can set aside our tribal differences and move on? She let out a breath. Fine, all right, maybe that wasn't fair. No, it wasn't, but I get it. Nothing's easy in this place, but let's pretend like we're on the same team, shall we? Fine. She leaned up against the wall and took a deep breath. Tell me again what you heard before I showed up. I gave her a quick recap of the events, going into the closet to get the masks, hearing Maria's voice echo down the hall, and catching a snippet of conversation that caught my attention. From there, I heard her mention the boss again, and writing a check and a bag full of cash. Then Fiona showed up. I have no clue what their game is, or who the boss is, or anything like that. It seems so strange. How could she move that much money around and nobody notice? That's what I want to find out. Fiona grunted and walked toward the door, peering out like we might get caught. Okay, here's the deal. I'll work on this with you, but we're partners. You're not making all the decisions, and I'm not going to do all the dirty work. Understood. I grinned at her, head tilted. So you're Sherlock, and I'm Watson. I like the sound of that. Except I'm Watson from the books. You know, a badass investigator. Whatever you say. Lighten up. This is going to be fun. You know, weirdly enough, uncovering fraud in my place of business isn't exactly my idea of fun. You must be really boring, then. She gave me another one of those beautiful, angry stares. I had a feeling I was going to see a lot of them. And another rule. We're not making this personal. This is all about finding out what Maria's up to and making sure she goes down for it. Right, nothing personal. So, I guess you don't want to go out for drinks after work then? Absolutely not. Right, okay, shouldn't have asked. She shook her head. Come on. Don't you have some other nurse you can drag around for fun? That's not really my game, you know. She snorted. That's not what I heard. I crossed my arms and watched her carefully. And what did you hear? She looked at me for a second, then shook her head. Nothing. Never mind. Forget it. Fiona. She walked to the door and pushed it open. Think about what we're doing next and get back to me. You know where I'll be. I watched her walk out and felt my own anger stir in my chest. I didn't know what she thought about me, but I wasn't the type to fuck my way through the nursing staff. My friend Gavin was like that, but he left the hospital a year ago, and I hadn't heard much from him since. As far as I knew, he was still happily married, which was never going to happen to me. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes, reliving one of my earliest memories, something that had happened right in a room like this. My mother, sitting on the bed with a broken arm and a black eye. My father hovering over her, his breath reeking of vodka, and the look he gave her, and the look he gave me, that spoke so loudly, though nobody in that room opened their mouths. That look meant silence, all silence, or else. It wasn't a good memory. Most of my memories from those years were bad, but for some reason, that one stood out. I could still remember the disinfectant, and the way the nurse looked at my father like he was some kind of monster, but still let me and my mom leave with him when it was time to go. No, I wasn't the marrying type, and I wasn't the type to sleep around at work. I got what I needed from bars and clubs, and I was always upfront about what it meant to go home with me. One night, no questions asked, no bullshit in the morning, one night of fun and nothing more. I'd had women balk at that proposition and walk away, and that was fine by me. I didn't want anyone getting involved that wasn't prepared for it. Maybe that was why I felt so off balance around Fiona. She was beautiful, that much was obvious, but there was something else about her. Maybe it was her attitude, or her anger, or her insistence on being treated like an equal, or something else, something ineffable. Whatever it was, it made me want to be around her, and that was dangerous. More dangerous than whatever scheme we were about to shove our noses into. 3. Fiona, I did my job, kept my head down, and concentrated. I didn't want to be a part of hospital gossip. That was never my intention. Of course, it never worked out that way. The next morning, I sat in the cafeteria with a cup of coffee and my legs stretched out in front of me. Mary stopped by and sat down with a sigh, her plate laden with a bagel, eggs, and a pile of bacon. "How was your date with Dr. Gorgeous?" I gave her a look. "You mean Dr. Corse?" "Dean Corse. He's a little young for me, but, sweetie, he seems like your type." I snorted. "Not even close." "Oh, hun, come on. Everyone talks about him." "I'm not everyone." She gave me a look and stabbed her eggs. She talked with her mouth full, and I had to stare down at my coffee to keep from feeling nauseous. "I've never seen that man ask a nurse to do a simple procedure for him before, and I've been on his floor a few times." "So what?" "So, it's a little strange is all." "There's nothing inappropriate happening." She shrugged. "Didn't say there was." I stood up and held my coffee with both hands. "We both know you're a gossip, Mary. Please don't make me the subject of your wild fantasies." "Come on, Fiona. It's not every day Dr. Gorgeous flirts with a nurse. He's one of the good ones, you know." I waved at her and walked off. I took a sip and burned my tongue as I stepped onto the elevator. I had to make room for a gurney and stared at the empty bed, at the starched, bleached linens, and wondered how many bodies it had held, how many people had tried to find comfort in that blanket, that overstuffed pillow. Hospitals were small villages, almost a city in miniature. They had their own laundry, their own food, their own sewer and electric and everything in between. They had their own economy, their own ecosystem. They also had their own social strata, with the doctors at the top, followed by the administrators, then the nursing staff, then the rest of the staff before them. Sometimes I felt like I was the only one that cared about it, like I was the only person conscious off my class in the whole place, or maybe I cared too much. There was something I didn't love about working with a doctor like this, but Dean meant well. And Mary was right. Dean didn't have such a bad reputation, even though I pretended like he did. Gavin had been much worse, back before he ran off with Erica, but Dean didn't seem to be like that. I had to grudgingly respect that, even if it was the bare minimum, because of course nobody should get involved with their co-workers, sexually or otherwise, which was why I flinched when Dean appeared an hour later while I was alone in a patient room, cleaning up after a checkout. He slid the door shut, then put his hand on my lower back, and I whirled on him, eyes hard and ready to tell him to go to hell. He smirked and pulled his hand back. "Busy?" he asked. "What the hell are you doing?" "Needed to get your attention." "You can use your words next time." Duly noted. "Are you busy?" I shrugged. "Straightening up this place." "You do that?" He frowned a little bit. "I thought we had other staff for that." "We do, but they sometimes take a while to get around here, and I don't want someone to have to wait for a bed if I can help it." He gave me an odd look, then motioned with his head. "Come on, I need a hand." Am I putting in another fake line? No, you're standing watch while I break into Maria's office. He turned to leave the room, but I reached out and grabbed his wrist on impulse. I squeezed and held it, pulling him back, heart racing. Hold on, are you insane? He looked back at me and grinned. Not even a little bit. There's no way in hell that I'm going to break into Maria's office. You're right, you're not. I'm breaking into her office and you're standing watch. He turned to go again, and this time I stepped in his way. I put my hand on his chest and felt the muscle beneath his scrubs, and my heart did a strange twist, which only pissed me off even more. Absolutely not. Then I'll do it on my own. He stared at me, but didn't move, and I dropped my hand from his chest. You're not going in alone. Which is it? I'm not going in, or I'm not going in alone? Because I'm sure as hell heading to her office right this second. Do you want to get fired? He laughed and shook his head. She's in a departmental meeting right now, and those things stretch for hours. We have plenty of time. What about her secretary? She's on her lunch break. He checked his watch. For exactly 20 more minutes. How the hell could you know that? I pay attention to things. He frowned at me and stepped forward. I didn't move, and we were inches apart. We can stand here and argue as much as you want, but we aren't getting another chance. You want to find proof that Maria's up to something? Let me get into her office. I took a deep breath and steadied myself. This was truly insane, way beyond what I thought we'd be doing, but then again, I didn't exactly know how we'd find proof without snooping around. My mind slipped back to that moment in the hall, and I knew I had to do something. Couldn't sit around and let her get away with stealing from the hospital. I let out a frustrated grunt and stepped aside. I'll keep watch, I said grudgingly. But seriously, at the first sign of anyone coming, I'll make sure to get the hell out of there. He strode into the hall, then toward the elevators. I scrambled to keep up, heart racing. I didn't know how he seemed so calm. We were on our way to break into the hospital administrator's office, which was basically a death sentence if we got caught. She'd make sure we never worked anywhere else again, I was sure of that. I couldn't believe Dean didn't seem to care that he was risking his entire career for this, and yet he didn't seem like he was joking around. We passed the nurse's station. Be back in a few, I said to Mary. She saluted me, then winked, and I got the feeling a new rumor was about to sprout up all over the hospital. She's going to talk about seeing us together, he muttered as he stepped onto the elevator and punched in the top floor. I was just thinking that same thing. Maybe she'll think we're having an affair. He looked down at me, and another smile quirked the edge of his lips. Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. Maybe not for you. I looked away toward the polished metal wall and saw our reflection, bent and blurry in the chrome, and stared at his tall body. I pictured him stooping down to kiss me, his arms wrapped around my hips, and I had to push the daydream aside. Nurses didn't get a free pass like doctors. The hospital was a jungle, and the doctors were the apex predators, which meant they got as much leeway as they wanted. If a young, handsome doctor slept around, well, boys will be boys. But if a nurse did the same thing, she'd be slut-shamed into oblivion and cast aside like trash. I wasn't about to risk getting a reputation like that. I worked damn hard to earn respect, and I didn't want to lose it all on some fling with Dr. Asshole over there, no matter how handsome he was, or dedicated to doing the right thing, or smart and gorgeous and funny. Well, shit. The elevator reached the top and he stepped out first. The executive wing was quiet, more like a typical office than a hospital. The floor had a thin carpet and the drop ceiling muffled sound. I was so used to the blinding fluorescent lights and the echoes of the main hospital that I felt lost for a second as we walked past cubicles, mostly quiet during lunchtime, back toward the offices lining the far wall of the building. He slowed and stopped, craning his neck to look around. Maria had the office in the far left corner. A small sitting area was set up outside, with her secretary's desk right outside the door, and fortunately it was all empty. "Sit there," he said, nodding at a couch. "I'll be a second. Pretend like you're waiting and say your name really loudly if someone shows up. Won't that be really obvious?" He shrugged. "If you've got a better idea, now's the time." I clenched my jaw, then sat down on the bouncy leather chair. "Hurry up." He nodded once, eyes serious, and walked to Maria's door. The knob turned, and he disappeared inside. I sat on the edge of the seat, anxiously bouncing my knee up and down. There were a few people in the office. I could hear someone talking on the phone in one of the cubes nearby, someone else typing away, someone coughing. I didn't think anyone noticed him slip inside, and I could probably come up with some excuse if they did. He was looking for patient paperwork, or he had a meeting with Maria that got pushed but he didn't realize, or something like that. Still, this was an insanely massive risk, and so far from worth it. Suddenly, there was a thump. I jumped to my feet, expecting something I wasn't sure, maybe a stampede of angry security guards. I rushed to the door and found Dean kneeling down next to a large, reddish-brown desk, picking up a silver paperweight with the hospital logo emblazoned on the top in glittery ink. He glanced up and shook the weight in the air before returning it to a stack of folders. "We should go," I hissed. "Not yet." He started pulling open drawers. "Haven't found anything suspicious." "What are you looking for, anyway?" "Financial documents. I don't know." He opened the bottom left drawer, reached in, and took something out. His eyes went wide as he held up what looked like a thick stack of $100 bills. Or a ton of cash. I stared at the bundle, and neither of us spoke for a beat. It was a thick stack, and I guessed it was at least a few $1,000s, maybe as much as 10 grand. He weighed it in his hands like the idol of an ancient god before shoving it back into place and yanking open another drawer. I was tempted to go in and help. Maria's office wasn't exactly large, and was taken up by the massive desk, a couple chairs, some filing cabinets, and bookshelves. Every conceivable space was covered with tchotchkes, mugs, statues, books and folders and papers in all shapes and sizes. He finished opening the drawers, then gave me a look. "Check outside," he said, nodding with his chin as he turned toward the bookshelf behind him. I stepped back into the waiting area and craned my neck around the corner. I froze, blood going frozen, when I spotted Maria's secretary talking with a young dark-haired man casually over at the far end of the aisle. I slipped back and shoved my head into the office. "The secretary, she's back." His eyes went wide. "Right now?" "Yes, right now." "Get the hell out of there." He jumped out from behind the desk and hurried toward me. We moved back into the main waiting room area, and he peered around the corner and down the hall before pulling back. "Shit," he said. "Come on, this way." I hesitated at the corner, took a deep breath, then walked forward, angling for the opposite side of the cube farm. Dean followed behind me, and we acted like we belonged, walking with purpose but not hurrying. A sudden move might catch her attention, and she might report to Maria that she saw the two of us lurking around. I glanced over in her direction before I disappeared behind the safety of the cube, and caught sight of her still engaged in conversation, smiling at something he'd said and laughing a little too loudly. I smiled a bit as I strode away. Seemed like she had a crush on that guy, which was lucky for us. Dean stayed with me, and we passed a few more people working in their cubes, but nobody bothered to look up. They might have wondered why a doctor and a nurse were wandering around the admin area, and I didn't want anyone asking questions. We reached the elevators, punched the call button, and waited. Neither of us spoke, and I shifted from foot to foot, uncomfortable and anxious. I wanted to get the hell out of here before... The doors slid open, and Maria stood in the back of the elevator car, staring down at her phone. She stepped forward and stopped, a look of surprise flashing across her face when she spotted me and Dean standing side by side. Dr. Corse, she said. Ms. Royle, what are you two doing up here? I completely froze. I stared at her, and my mind felt like an engine that refused to turn over. I couldn't come up with a single reason why the hell we'd be in the admin section of the building, not during a shift. I'd never been up in here before, and as far as I knew, staff usually didn't mingle with administrators. Dean stepped forward, and a dazzling, charming smile spread across his face. Maria, perfect. We were just looking for you. She tilted her head and stepped off the elevator. What can I do for you two? We were discussing billing for a patient, and I thought I'd bring it directly to you. She glanced at me, and I plastered a stupid smile on my lips. Dr. Corse here disagrees with certain decisions. I was about as vague as it got, but whatever, I was panicking. Right, Maria said slowly. Okay, sure, but I'm not really the person you'd want to talk to. You need to go to the billing department. Ah, right. Well, I was hoping I could go over their heads. Dean gave her another charming smirk and leaned closer. You're much more efficient. She smiled back, and I honestly couldn't believe she was buying his shit. That's definitely true. So what do you say? Got a second to help us out? Sorry, I wish I could, but you really need to take it to billing. They'll handle whatever problem you guys have, okay? Dean made a show of sighing dramatically. Fine, okay. I appreciate it anyway, Maria. Right, good luck. She gave me an odd smile, then looked back at her phone and strode off. Dean smashed the call button, and the doors opened immediately. We stepped inside and wrote it back down. I let out a shaky breath and stared up at him. That was good. Thanks. He closed his eyes and leaned his head against the wall. That was too damn close, though. I thought you said she'd be busy. I thought she would be. He grunted and looked down at me. Now she knows we were up there. She won't know. You're probably right. He tilted his head. Thanks for coming along. You saved my ass. I freaked out, mostly. You did all the hard work. He shrugged and draped an arm across my shoulders. I was too surprised to pull away. We make a good team, he said. The elevator dinged, the doors opened, and he removed his arm. He stepped out into the hall, then turned and held the doors open. You should give me your number. My phone number? We need to talk. He glanced to the side. Somewhere away from the hospital. Business only. This isn't an invitation to call me whenever you want. I wouldn't dream of it. I hesitated, then sighed and rattled my number off. He took out his phone, typed it in, and sent me a text. I watched him walk off without a word, hurrying toward wherever the hell he was supposed to be, probably on rounds. I lingered before hitting the button for the lower floor and watched the door slide shut. That was, without a doubt, the dumbest thing I'd ever done in my whole life. But my heart was still racing, and I felt like I was buzzing off the adrenaline of almost getting caught, and that touch at the end, so innocent, almost a friendly hug, drove me wild with something I hadn't felt in a long time. Dean was going to be trouble, I knew it, and yet I wanted that trouble. For Dean spent the rest of that afternoon thinking about that office. It was a typical office. Awards, papers, little statues, pictures of her family, a sister, maybe a nephew, her parents, all the crap you'd imagine would be there, except for the stack of $100 bills. I hadn't gotten to go through the rest of it as thoroughly as I wanted. The filing cabinet remained untouched, and I figured that if there were going to be any incriminating documents, they'd be stuck inside. We got interrupted way faster than I expected. I thought I had that all planned out. Maria's calendar was public, sitting there for anyone to find if they felt like looking for it, and I knew the secretary always took lunch around then because that was when I ate lunch down in the cafeteria. I'd see her sitting alone, reading a book, eating soup, almost every single day, and yet today had been different. It was a close call, but that money kept bothering me. Why the hell did a hospital administrator have so much cash lying around in her desk? It made no sense, and I couldn't think up a plausible reason for it, unless that guy had given it to her the other night, and she hadn't had a chance to deposit it yet. Or maybe she wouldn't deposit it at all. Once it went into a bank, the feds could track it, but cash was almost invisible. I resisted the temptation to text Fiona that night, ignored her at the hospital the next day, even though our shifts lined up again, and finally called her that evening as I stood out on my tiny, cramped concrete balcony that overlooked Rittenhouse. She answered on the second ring, sounding harried and tired. "I hope this is business," she said. "Nice to hear from you, too." She sighed. "I just got home. It was a long day." "I bet it was. Want to talk about it?" "Not with you." I laughed. "Come on. How about over dinner?" She didn't speak for a long moment. "I don't date doctors." "It's not a date." I paused, looking out over the street at the people moving down below me. "We need to talk." "Fine," she said, sounding put out, as if dinner with me would be so bad. "When and where?" "An hour. There's a place called Tria Cafe." "I know it. Fancy little place." "I'm buying." "Works for me. See you soon." I was tempted to tell her to wear something cute for me, but I figured that would only piss her off, although it wasn't exactly hard to drive her wild. Fiona had a temper unlike anyone I'd ever met, but she was fiercely protective of her patients, and she was a damn good nurse, so she pretty much got away with being a total spitfire. I liked that she stood up to me and all the other doctors, and I loved that she didn't take shit from anyone, but it did make this a little more difficult. She suspected my intentions, and that wasn't easy to get past. Then again, my intentions weren't entirely pure. I showered and got dressed. I decided to go casual, but put on my nice leather jacket and a good shirt. I spent a little more time in the mirror than I normally did, and had to remind myself that this wasn't a date, a fact that I was sure Fiona would immediately mention the first chance she got. I had a small drink, then headed out into the cool evening air, breathing deep the car exhaust and Philly slime. Couples ambled past me, walking their yappy white dogs, men bundled in black overcoats, women in chic jackets and expensive handbags, and I was reminded that I lived in one of the more affluent areas of the city. It was hard to imagine that crime and grift and theft existed in a place like this, but the rich were as corrupt as anyone else, even more so. The rich were good at keeping their money and getting more than their fair share. Tria was packed, but I knew the hostess. She was the daughter of one of my patients, a kind older man with neurological issues, mostly relating to motor functions, and I suspected he might be heading toward Alzheimer's, but I hadn't told them that yet, not until I was sure. "Just you tonight, doctor?" she asked. I shook my head. "Meeting someone?" Her eyebrows raised. She was a small girl, thick dark hair, big, beautiful eyebrows. "You're on a date?" "Not exactly." "Good. I hoped you were saving yourself for me." I laughed and shook my head. "Sorry, Melissa, you know I don't date patients." "But I'm not the patient." "Fair point. Are you trying to get me to bribe you for a table?" She leaned closer. "I'd never, ever do that." "Good." I smiled again, feeling slightly uncomfortably, and waiting for the moment to pass. She turned again, then waved me on. There was a single high-top table left in the far corner. I took a seat. She put a menu down, then waved and headed back to her tiny station at the front. I ordered a whiskey. Fiona showed up 10 minutes later, and I sat up straighter as she waded into the crowd. She practically glowed, somehow standing apart from the affluent dinner crowd in a conservative white blouse and dark jacket, her auburn hair down in long curls over one shoulder. I felt my heart rush as she came toward me, our eyes locking for a moment before she sat down, her back straight, head tilted to the side. "Wasn't sure you'd show up," I said. "You look good." "Thanks. Wasn't sure I'd come." "I'm glad you did. Want something to drink?" She nodded, and I flagged down the waitress. She asked for a white wine, and when it came, she took a long sip, leaning back in her chair. The group behind her laughed loudly, and there were several intense conversations happening at the bar, but I couldn't pay attention to anything but her. I leaned forward, and she leaned toward me. "Why would a hospital administrator have that much cash in her desk drawer?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know. I don't either. I keep thinking about it, though. Maybe she's going on vacation. Maybe." I clucked my tongue and shook my head. But she would have scheduled that months in advance. There's nothing on her calendar. "You have her calendar?" I gave her a look. "It's public." She sighed and shook her head. "I should have thought of that. Probably." She gave me a look. The waitress returned, asked if we wanted food, then headed off when Fiona said no, and I shook my head. I sipped my whiskey and placed it down, turning it in slow circles on its edge. "Maybe she doesn't trust banks," Fiona said, "or maybe that guy left it for her. That's another strong possibility." She shifted in her seat, then leaned closer, her voice dropping softer. I had to tilt my head to catch what she was saying. "Are we doing the right thing here? I mean, this is bizarre, right?" "It's bizarre," I agreed, "but something's up. You're not backing down, are you?" "Of course not, I'm just—" She trailed off, biting her lip. "What?" "I worked hard to get where I am. I can understand that." "No, you can't." She gave me a look, then sighed, drank some wine, and put the glass back down. "I was in an accident when I was a teenager. A really bad accident that nearly paralyzed me and left me with some lasting damage." I arched an eyebrow and resisted the urge to go into full-on doctor mode. I wanted to ask the extent of her injuries, what her lasting damage was, how she was coping with it now, maybe suggest some rehabilitation, but held my tongue. She was a smart person, and if there was something she could do for herself, she'd do it. "I'm sorry to hear that. Wasn't easy finishing high school, much less getting through college and nursing school, and landing this job was a goddamn fight." She laughed a little, shaking her head. "Who would have thought that a spot at Mercy would be so competitive? We know it's a shit show, but it doesn't seem that way from the outside." "Exactly. So it's just, I don't want to risk losing what I've worked hard for." I finished my whiskey and nodded slowly. "I know what you mean. I don't want you to get into trouble, believe me. If you want to walk away, I won't hold it against you." "That's not what I'm saying." Her eyes got hard as she sat up straight again. "I just want you to know the stakes. It's not some game we're playing, okay? We're not pretending to be detectives." "Lives are at stake," I said. "Exactly." We sat like that for a moment. I ordered another whiskey from the waitress and took a long drink when she came back with it. Fiona looked away, and I thought I saw a sadness inside of her that I'd never noticed before, probably because she masked it so well with that temper of hers. I wondered about that accident, but pushed away the questions. "I don't want to push you into anything. I know what you mean about overcoming things, working hard for things." She flashed me a look. "Yeah? Do you? Mr. Handsome Young Doctor?" I laughed. "Thank you for calling me handsome, but it's true. I was an army kid growing up." Her expression softened. "You moved around a lot?" "I went to 5 different high schools, split my senior year in half. That was pretty miserable." "Must have been hard." I managed. "Probably wasn't as bad as what you went through. I had difficult parents, though. A father that wasn't exactly supportive, and was pissed when I decided not to join the Marines and went to college instead." "He was disappointed you wanted to be a doctor?" She arched an eyebrow, showing a hint of surprise. "Believe it or not," I said, shrugging. I could still see my father's face when I told him I wasn't enlisting and wanted to become a doctor instead. It was pure anger and disappointment, like I'd told him that I wanted to murder a classroom full of toddlers. He looked at me like I was a monster, like I was less than human, like he'd treated me my whole life. I can't really imagine that. He thought a career in the military was the most honorable and noble thing a person could do. He brought me up thinking I'd follow in his footsteps, but that was never something I wanted, not after watching how it warped him into the miserable, rotten asshole he became. She grimaced slightly. That sounds horrible. I let out a breath and held up a hand. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that and unloaded on you. It's fine, really. I'm sort of just realizing that I don't really know anything about you, aside from your specialty, and I don't know much about you either. How about this? She gave me a look, finished her wine, and pressed her lips together. If we're going to follow through with this thing, let's do it together. No more coming up with a plan than yanking me along at the last second. Fair enough, but no more acting like I'm the enemy. Her eyes narrowed and her nostrils flared. I'm not acting like... She caught herself before she finished and took a breath. All right, fine. It's a deal then. I held out my hand. She hesitated, then shook it. I looked into her eyes and held her gaze there, wondering what was going through her head, my fingers touching hers before I let them go and leaned back. What now then? She asked. I've got some theories, if you want to hear. She gestured. Go for it. I flagged down the waitress again, ordered another drink for Fiona, then cleared my throat. Maria's involved in moving money around. Whether she's laundering money or what, I don't know. I was thinking, who the hell in this city would get involved in a scheme like that? And a few groups came to mind. Which ones? She sipped her new glass of wine, leaning toward me again. First, politicians. I don't know which one or why, but they have the flout and the cash. Second, a union. Maybe the nurses' union, though I can't imagine that guy has anything to do with them. Fiona interrupted me. Not the nurses' union. I'm a member. Do you know everything your leadership does? No, but I like the girls in charge. I shrugged. Fair enough. That leaves me with the mafia. She didn't react, and I found that fascinating. Of the three options, I thought the mob was probably the most outlandish and absurd. Of course, there was organized crime in Philadelphia. Every major city had organized crime. But I couldn't picture them getting involved with a hospital. And yet, she didn't seem surprised at all by the suggestion. Why do you think they might have something to do with this? She asked. I shrugged. They'd have the money, and buying off people is sort of what they do, right? But it's a crazy idea. It can't be the mob. It could be. I stared at her, eyes narrowed. How? I probably shouldn't tell you this. She hesitated, running a finger along the rim of her glass. You remember Gavin? Of course, we're still in the same fantasy league. I hear he's doing pretty good out in California, living the dream life. His wife, Erica, she was involved with the mafia. I stared at her, then laughed, but my laughter died when she stared back at me with a straight face. You're kidding, right? That pretty blonde girl? It's a long story, Fiona said, grimacing. And it's not my place to go into details, but I'm not joking around here. They left the city because of the mob. Holy shit. I leaned back and took a long slug of my whiskey. That's absolutely insane. I know, but the mafia isn't so outside the realm of possibility. I mean, they were already involved with a doctor and a patient. Who knows what else they were up to in the hospital? I shook my head and stared at her full lips, trying to wrap my head around the idea that Gavin and Erica had something to do with organized crime. It was almost impossible to picture it, and yet they had left really abruptly, gotten married out of the blue, and certain parts of their story never quite matched up. The mafia, I said softly. Okay then, so the mafia. I don't know for sure. She paused and tugged on her hair. I'm just saying it's possible. Are you still in touch with Gavin? She nodded. I'm friends with Erica still, although we're drifting apart a little. Hard to stay close across the country. Ask them what he knows. Maybe he has some info, a contact, whatever. I don't know. I haven't talked to them about this since they left. We need to start somewhere, right? It can't hurt. She finished her wine. Can't hurt you since you're not asking. Don't worry, my task is going to be much more dangerous. I leaned toward her, eyes locked on hers. I'm breaking into that office again. Come on, are you serious? We barely got away last time. I don't care. We need to know what she's got in there. Dean, I'll be smarter about it. Go in after hours. I have a night shift coming up soon. I can sneak away. Shit. She rubbed at her temples. You're serious? Of course I'm serious. Nobody will be up in that office. I can get in and out. There are security cameras. So what? I'm a doctor. I grinned at her and tilted my head. Nobody would suspect a thing. She groaned, but waved a hand. All right, fine. Do what you have to do. Okay, then. I held up my glass with the dregs of my whiskey. Let's have a toast to our team. She held up her glass. To Watson and Sherlock. And to getting to the bottom of this case. We drank, and I caught her smiling, which sent a thrill down my spine. She leaned her head to the side, and her cheeks were slightly pink. Maybe from the heat in the cramped cafe, maybe from the alcohol, or maybe from the way I looked at her like I wanted to undress her nice and slow. One more drink? I asked. I saw her consider it, and I thought she might say yes, but she stood up and shook her head. I'd better get home. Sure I can't tempt you with actual dinner. Nice try. She smiled at me, lingered for half a second, then turned and left. I watched her go and let out a disappointed sigh. I left a wad of cash on the table and waved goodbye to Melissa as I stepped out onto the street. Fiona was long gone, and I wondered what she was thinking. I liked getting to know her a little bit more. I felt like I got a peek beneath her exterior, that tough, pissed-off facade she put up for everyone all the time. I understood a little better why she was like that, and I couldn't imagine what she'd gone through and what she'd overcome. And I liked telling her about my family, at least a little bit. I wasn't ready to go into the gory details, how my father would beat my mother, then turn on me, all in the name of toughening us up, or whatever insane excuse he came up with after the fact, but it was nice to talk about it a little bit. I rarely brought it up, and rarely let myself get close to anyone, all because I kept wondering if that animal was inside of me, if that strange, psychotic part of my father that set him off sometimes and turned him into a piece of shit was inside of me as well, waiting to come screaming out from deep inside me. The possibility made the idea of a serious, committed relationship seem like too big of a risk. Still, talking about it a little bit felt good. I wouldn't let myself go too far down that road, but this partnership with her might not end up poorly after all. 5, Fiona, I called Erica the next night. She picked up after a couple rings and sounded a little breathless. How are you, sweetie? I asked. Doing good, she said, running around like crazy, though. Oh, yeah? I know we've been here for a year, but I feel like we're still getting settled. It's not easy, getting used to an entirely new place. I sat down on my living room couch and curled my feet underneath me. My apartment was a hodgepodge of styles, and half my stuff was bought second-hand at a thrift store outside the city. I made good money, but I lived in a nice neighborhood, which meant most of my cash went to rent. Not that it mattered, since I didn't have much of a social life. Erica was a good friend for the brief time we knew each other, but she moved away. We've kept in touch and text and talk on the phone constantly, but it's not quite the same thing as seeing each other in person. I get drinks with some of the other nurses sometimes and go out to see movies once in a while, but I haven't been on a date since high school and haven't been able to bring myself to get involved with anyone seriously since the accident. I know, but still, I just spent an hour in the grocery store because I couldn't decide what I was going to make for dinner tonight. You cook for Gavin? She laughed. When he's lucky. How's his new job doing? Good. He's starting over from scratch pretty much, but he's got a full patient list and he seems happy. That's important. I'd hate to start over at a new hospital. You have to learn where everything is all over again, and I swear I'm just figuring out where stuff is at Mercy. Erica snorted. Don't tell me that. You were my nurse. Speaking of which, your mom's still good. Still good. Gavin watches her like a hawk. Good man. I cleared my throat softly and fidgeted. Gavin's not home right now by any chance, is he? Actually, yeah, he had the day off. Why, what's up? I was wondering if I could ask him something. Sure. Want me to give him my phone? I can call him if you want. No, hold on a second. I heard her cover the receiver as she had a muffled, whispered conversation. I felt awkward, and I realized I should have called him from the start, but I wanted to talk to Erica more than anything. I wished I could spill it all to her, but I wanted to see what Gavin said first, and anyway, I figured he'd tell her all about it when we were finished talking. Okay, hey, sorry, here he is. She passed the phone over. Hey, Fiona. Gavin's familiar voice made me smile a little bit. He used to drive me crazy back in the day. He slept with every single nurse in the hospital and didn't seem to have any qualms about it. I always thought he was a useless womanizer, at least until Erica dropped into his life. He had it hard, though. His sister was murdered by her husband, and his parents died in an accident, so I knew he suffered a lot. I didn't realize how much until everything happened with them, and now I'd say that we were friends, although still nowhere near as close as me and Erica. Hey, Gavin, I have something weird to ask you, and I need you to promise not to overreact. Okay, sure, he said slowly. I can try. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I hesitated. Well, something's wrong. How much do you know about the mafia? A long silence on his end. I thought we might have been disconnected, but then I heard something ruffle along the receiver, like he'd just moved to a different spot and adjusted his phone. I take it something's going down if you're asking about them, he said, voice dropping in volume. It's hard to explain, and I'm not sure how much you want to know. Are you in trouble? No, not exactly. Doesn't sound promising? I laughed a little. I swear I'm okay. But something's going on at Mercy, and we're trying to get to the bottom of it. We? Me and Dean. Dean Corse? He barked a laugh, and I grimaced a little, holding the phone from my ear. No kidding, I never thought he'd be the one to finally break through your ice wall. That's not what's happening. Whatever you say. Can you help me or what? I felt my anger rising, and I knew I'd better try to get this conversation over with before I ended up berating him. As much as I needed his help, I wasn't about to sit back and let him be an asshole. That wasn't my style. Like I said, I don't know much about them. If you're tangled up with the mafia, you should go to the police. You didn't. And look what it got me. He hesitated and let out a breath. I guess it could be worse. I'm looking for a contact, someone relatively friendly. I know you talked to a lot of people when you guys went through your little problem. There is one guy. He didn't sound sure, and I had a bad feeling in my gut. But he's not exactly friendly. Give it to me anyway. His name's Dr. Chen. I don't know his first name, so don't ask. I can text you his number. He's in the mafia? Works for them. He's their house doctor, the guy Dante and Vincent wanted me to replace. Dante and Vincent? They're like the big bosses. I don't have contact info for them, and even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you. You need to stay far away from those two if you can. Understood. If you're in trouble, seriously, Fiona, go to the cops. Don't try to make this work on your own. Erica and I got lucky, and who knows how long that luck will hold. They might chase us down out here. I don't think so. You never know. He grunted, and I got the sense that he was standing up for something. Seriously, Fiona, you need to be careful. And if there's anything I can do, that phone number will be a good start. You got it. He chuckled again. Dean, huh? How's he doing? He's doing fine, and it's not like that. You could do a lot worse. Gavin, whatever. Enjoy yourself and stay out of trouble, okay? These guys are no joke. Yeah, I know. Good. Erica worries about you sometimes. I couldn't help but laugh a little. She worries about me? Sure, I guess because your fuck you barriers are up all the time and it's hard for you to get to know people. She's worried you're lonely and miserable. That's sort of insulting. Yeah, I know. And I don't have barriers. He snorted. You absolutely do. You were convinced I was going to hurt Erica from the start, even though I did nothing but prove over and over that I wanted what was best for her. Can you blame me? That whole situation was crazy. True, but you're in it now, aren't you? I let out a breath through my nose. I guess I am. Be careful then. And let down the shields from time to time, all right? Goodbye, Gavin. Later. I hung up the phone and leaned back on my couch. I shut my eyes and tried to picture Gavin and Erica together in their little house at the edge of the mountains, and for some strange reason, I felt a pang of jealousy. I got up, walked to the refrigerator, took out a bottle of wine and poured a glass. I took a long drink as I returned to the couch and sat back down, legs curled underneath me. The phone buzzed, and a phone number appeared on the screen. I saved it in my contacts, as Dr. Chen then considered calling Dean to tell him about the news. But I hesitated. I thought about the accident again, like I did so many times over the years, and my fingers strayed to the scar that ran down the length of my stomach, bisecting my belly button and ending 2 inches above my crotch. It was ugly still, even after all these years, and I hated it so much. I remembered how it had felt for that big, jagged piece of glass to slice down my front, the feeling of warm blood on the seat, of my boyfriend groaning in pain. I was barely 16 when it happened. At the time, I was dating an older boy named Jim O'Malley, a handsome guy that played on the basketball team for our parochial school. He was nice to me, and we had a good time together, at least until that night, driving too fast down a quiet Buck County back road, laughing wildly with the windows down, swerving slightly. I hadn't realized how drunk he was, not until we got into the car. I was a little drunk, too, not as bad as him, but enough to take the edge off, to blur the danger enough. 1 second, we were turning around a bend to the left, and the next, he jerked the wheel to the right, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision with a truck, but losing control and smashing into a tree. I smelled burned rubber, heard the tires scream. He said something. I'd never remember what, and his hand pressed against my chest like he wanted to hold me in place. Impact was instant. Most of what happened after was a blur. The smell of oil and gasoline, bits and pieces of glass and tree bark in my hair, pain hot and wild all over my limbs, my spit rolling down my chin as I rolled onto the damp grass, someone shouting to get moving, the car horn blaring. I remembered stumbling from the car, blood all over me, and an ambulance's lights flashing along the road, illuminating the cornfield nearby. Dogs barked somewhere, angry. We both survived. He had a bad concussion and broken bones, and ended up getting probation. I had scrapes, bruises, cuts, and one large scar down the front of me that never would heal right. I dumped him the next day, but that didn't help. The accident left me broken, tainted, ruined. I'd never get over it. Maybe that was why I went into nursing. The idea of helping other people heal from their injuries appealed to me, even if I'd never heal from mine. I sucked in a breath, finished my glass of wine, and called up Dean. He answered right away. "I was just thinking about you," he said. "Spare me the details. Don't be dirty. Actually, on second thought, please be dirty." I rolled my eyes, but couldn't help smiling. "You wish." "I sure do." He adjusted the phone, and I heard it scrape against cloth. So, to what do I owe the pleasure? I just got off the phone with Gavin. How's he doing? Seems pretty good. What did he have to say? Warned me to back off, first of all. He's probably right about that. He laughed softly, but with a hint of bitterness. Are you having second thoughts? Not at all, actually. You'll learn soon enough, but I don't back down easy. I get the feeling I understand that all too well already. What else did he say? Gave me some names. Dante and Vincent, they're two of the big bad bosses, but he said not to get involved with them. He told me about another guy named Dr. Chen, gave me a number. Dr. Chen, huh? I take it he's their personal doctor? I guess so. He didn't go into detail. All right, that's good to know then. We can reach out to him if we need to. It's not much, though. I mean, we still don't know anything. No, we don't, but we're getting started. He chuckled slightly. You know, I'm weirdly jealous of Gavin. Yeah? You wish you got chased out of town by the mafia? No, but he found someone he loves. That's no small thing. I didn't know you were a hopeless romantic. Not exactly, but you have to admit, there's something appealing about the whole thing. I hesitated and eyed my empty wine glass. Honestly, I don't ever plan on having a family. He was quiet for a second. I'm curious about why not, but you don't have to tell me. I know I don't. I clenched my jaw and felt like an idiot for saying that. I gotta get going. I'll see you later. I hung up before he could argue and tossed my phone to the other side of the couch in frustration. I didn't know why I told him I didn't want a family, because that wasn't exactly true. It wasn't that I didn't want one, but that I couldn't have one. My fingers played with the scar on my stomach again, and I stared up at the ceiling of my tiny apartment and heard water dripping somewhere, the muffled sounds of my downstairs neighbors arguing, a radio playing in the apartment next to mine, and I pictured all their tiny lives playing out in rooms like mine, their own thoughts and feelings centered on their own experiences, and my quiet life another side effect, another minor thing happening on the margins. It was strange, picturing it all, and I felt a crushing sense of loneliness, one I hadn't felt in such a long time, or at least hadn't let myself feel. It was Dean, and I knew it. He woke this up in me, made me start thinking about my future, about what I wanted from the rest of my life, and I almost resented him for it. We've known each other for a while, but it wasn't until recently, when we got involved with this mafia thing, with this money-laundering mystery, that I began to wonder if maybe I did need more. It didn't matter what I wanted or needed. Biology was just that, and reality couldn't be denied. I got up, filled up my glass, and tried not to let my bitterness overwhelm me. 6. Dean. He lounged back in my office looking over a patient file, exhausted from a long shift. I tried to focus on the chart in front of me, lab results, doctor notes, patient history, but none of it cohered into anything resembling a rational diagnosis. It was frustrating, but unsurprising. This sort of thing was usually fixed by a good night's sleep, something that I'd been sorely lacking lately. It was past midnight, and the hospital was quiet. Everyone hated night shifts, except for me, of course. I actually liked the hospital at night, the silent, dimmed halls, the sounds of the nursing and janitorial staff moving around as quietly as they could, the hushed voices over beeping monitors. Night was always a surreal time, and I felt as though I got my best work done when the place was half asleep. Except for tonight, of course. Tonight, I was on the tail end of a 12-hour shift and ready to get the fuck back to my apartment and into my comfortable bed, but I had one last task before I could check out for the evening. I checked the time again and again, and finally took out my phone to text Fiona. Hello, Fiona. Are you ready to break some laws? She got back to me 10 minutes later. Can you not say it that way? I take it that means you're all set. Come meet me at my office. She didn't reply, But 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps on the carpet outside. I stood and opened the door, and there stood Fiona, her auburn hair shining, her eyes pissed off and wary. "I still think this is a massively bad idea," she said, "and I still hear you but respectfully disagree." I stepped out of my office, shut the door, and locked it. "Now come on, let's get moving." She grunted in reply and followed me to the elevators. We rode them in silence up to the top floor and stepped out onto the administrative wing. Most of the lights were off. I lingered in the elevator lobby, listening for any sounds, but heard nothing. I grabbed Fiona by the wrist on instinct and held her there, and although she glared at me, she didn't try to pull away. We walked inside together, trying not to make any sounds, and I had to admit that the place seemed almost eerie in the evening. Only emergency lights shone, casting barely enough to see by. I took a small pen flashlight from my pocket and clicked it on, and Fiona gave me a look, but said nothing. We reached Maria's office, and the door was unlocked. The inside was as cluttered and messy as before, but it looked somehow ominous without the bright fluorescence. Fiona reached for the switch, but I stopped her, hand on her shoulder. "Keep it dark," I whispered, then handed her the flashlight. "You check the filing cabinets." She gave me a look, then shook her head in frustration, but started rifling through drawers. I walked to the desk and booted up the computer as I looked through Maria's bookshelves. Nothing interesting jumped out at me. I did notice that the bundle of cash in her bottom left drawer was gone, which had to mean something. She probably took it home with her and spent it all. I wondered what a hospital administrator would need with that kind of money, what sort of extravagances she was addicted to. But then again, she could need it for more mundane things. Sick relative, old debts, any number of crushing financial burdens could cause her to take mafia money. Once the computer turned on, I stared at a login screen before pulling open the knee drawer. Inside was a post-it note with a string of letters and numbers written in Maria's cramped hand. "Shitty security," I muttered, grinning as I typed in the password and logged in. I plugged a USB stick into the computer tower, then started copying over files. I did it in big batches, taking entire folders, not discriminating. She had a lot of stuff on there, and I had no clue what I was looking for, so I figured I could go through it all later. "Look at this," Fiona whispered, holding the flashlight over a stack of papers. I got up and walked over, peering over her shoulder. I got closer to her than I needed to, mostly because it was dark, and this was exciting, and she drove me wild. She glanced back at me but said nothing, nodding at the pages. There were numbers in columns, lots and lots of numbers. "What am I looking at?" "Financial report from 2016. That's pretty old. And you know what it says?" "I'm not an idiot." She gave me a look. I laughed. "I guess I'm an idiot, because that looks like gibberish. This is for one particular insurance company. Here, there are more in these folders. Anything recent? I think she has it up to this year. Grab that folder." She hesitated. "Won't she notice it's missing?" "I'll replace it the day after tomorrow." She sighed, took the folder, and tucked it under her arm, then went back to searching. I walked to the computer, finished downloading files, yanked the USB stick, and turned off the computer. I stood and watched Fiona for a second, marveling at how far she'd come. A couple weeks ago, she never would have set foot in Maria's office like this, and now she was stealing like a professional. I was proud of her, in a weird way, and insanely attracted to her dedication. "We should go," I whispered. She nodded and stood, folder tucked under one arm. As we moved to the door, I heard a sound out in the main cube farm. I held up a hand and peered around the corner, and spotted a janitor dumping trash cans into the big bucket attached to his cart. He hummed to himself, bobbing his head to a portable radio playing classic rock. I moved back into the office and put my hand over the flashlight. Fiona stared at me, eyes wide. "Janitor," I hissed. She turned off the flashlight. I took it, and slipped it into my pocket. The office was pitch black then. The door opened only the barest of cracks, just enough to see. I felt Fiona press herself closer to me, looking outside, and we stood there, frozen in place. Her body was warm, and I slipped an arm around her waist, not thinking about it, moving on autopilot, and she drifted closer to me, pressing tighter like a cat. I breathed her smell and wondered what was happening here, in this moment, in this place. I always told myself I wasn't going to get involved with women, that I had to keep myself as far away from them as possible. Sex was one thing, but feelings, relationships, melding two lives together was a step I couldn't take, and I knew Fiona wasn't the type of girl to go for a one-night stand. She was something else, smart, angry, beautiful. I wanted more of her every time we were together, and now in this office, in this moment where our futures hung in the balance, I found myself needing her more than I dreamed possible. The janitor moved as if in slow motion. We stayed in that office, waiting as he went cube to cube, dumping, humming, sometimes singing. He was a skinny white guy, stringy dark hair cut short, patchy beard, and blotchy skin. "We have to make a break for it," I whispered. "We can wait until he goes." I shook my head. "He'll do the offices next." She sucked in a breath. "Shit, you're right. He'll come here last, so when he hits that first office up there, we'll get out, okay? Maybe he won't. Maybe we can wait." I heard the hope in her voice, and I knew she was lying to herself. I pulled her tight against me. She let out a surprised breath, and I pressed my lips against her ear, whispering directly against her, my body ringing with the illicit thrill of it. "We have to run," I said. "Trust me." She turned slightly, almost pulling herself free, but stopped. I felt her tip her chin up toward me, her cheek brushing against mine, as her lips moved closer to my ear. "Don't ever pull me like that again." And then she pushed me back, and I could see her glaring at me in the darkness. I grinned at her, unable to help it, then looked back through the crack. The janitor cleared the last 2 trash cans, then angled for the office at the front, left the room. "Ready?" I said. "Wait!" I threw the door open and strode out, walking fast, but not running. The janitor was in the office, dumping the can, his back turned to us. I reached the far end of the cube farm and put it between him and me. Fiona followed, hurrying and barely making the edge. We walked to the far end, then paused and listened as the janitor left that first office and went to the next one. I held up a hand, waiting, and once he was inside, I made my move, reaching back to grab Fiona's wrist, tugging her along. I heard her curse, and I knew she was pissed, but we reached the elevator bank. I smashed the button, and the doors opened. She slipped in first, and I followed, and I leaned back against the wall, releasing a pent-up breath as the doors slid shut and the car dropped down. Neither of us spoke in the heavy quiet of the elevator ride. When it reached my office's floor, I turned to her and held out a hand. She stared at me, her eyes sparkling malice, and she handed the folder over, but didn't release it. "Are you sure you can read it?" The doors started to shut, and I held them open with my foot. "I'll figure it out," she snorted. "Maybe I should keep this." "Maybe, but I have a feeling you don't want to risk getting caught with something like that." She opened her mouth, then shut it again. She released the folder, passing it into my hands, and the responsibility that came with it. I hesitated another moment, looking at her, and I felt her apprehension, her anger, and I wanted to ask her what happened to make her hate me like this, to make her cringe back when I came too near, and instead I turned away, letting the doors close behind me as I left her there and returned to my office. She wouldn't answer. I knew it as well as she did. I'd have to earn my answers one way or another, whether she wanted to give them or not. 7. Fiona, I felt like I was on an adrenaline high for the next day. Every time I paused for long enough, I thought about our little heist, and my stomach did strange flips. Not only because we'd robbed the hospital administrator's office, there was also that moment near the door when he whispered in my ear and pulled me close against him, and I liked feeling his body so near, warm, liquid with pleasure and ease, confident and strong. I liked it so much more than I thought I would. When his lips were close to my ear, I felt a shiver of pleasure roll down my spine. It scared me, and I lashed out against him like I knew I would, pushing him away. I shouldn't have done it. I should have leaned into that moment and enjoyed it like I wanted to, but years and years of keeping people at a distance trained me to react with anger to any perceived hint of emotion and warmth. It wasn't a good quality of mine, but it was necessary to get me through the day, to keep me going, keep me sane. I didn't hear from him right away, not until a couple days later. I was looking in on a patient, a young girl named Lynn. She was a little pixie of a thing with short dark hair, big round eyes, and a beaming, infectious smile. I'd seen her in the hospital a couple of times before, each time coming in for the same complaint, a constant headache, most of the time mild and dull, but sometimes so intense it made her vomit and shake. Today was one of those awful times, and she grimaced as I walked into the room, as if having another person around made her head hurt worse. "How are you today?" I asked, lingering next to her bed before checking her vitals. "Oh, she said, "hanging in there." She tried to smile and grimaced again. "What did Dr. Foster say?" I asked. She was Richard's patient, which was a shame for her, because Richard was a total asshole. He was a good doctor, but a real jerk. "He's ordering more tests," she said. "Although we've done everything already. Blood work, MRI, everything. There's always another test." I sighed a little, adjusted the flow on her IV, and pretended to be busy, while really I just wanted to make sure she was comfortable. "Dr. Foster's good. He'll figure out what's up." "I'm suffering," she said. "You know what I mean? I'm starting to feel like this thing won't ever go away." "I know, I'm so sorry." I frowned a little and gave her that look every nurse learned to give, a strange combination of pity and empathy. "Thanks." She tried to smile again and managed it. "Try to rest if you can. Do you need anything? Water or anything?" "Water would be good." "Sure thing. I'll be right back." I walked out into the hall, got her a big cup with water and ice, then lingered at the nurse's station. Dr. Foster really had ordered everything. I'd looked at her chart the last time I checked in on her and saw that he'd done pretty much everything, which suggested he had no clue what was going on with her. I knew doctors pretty well, and when they got to the point of not knowing a damn thing about a patient's condition, they'd more often than not punt them off on someone else or send them home with some bullshit diagnosis and some generic prescription. I didn't want that to happen to Lynn. She was a sweet girl, maybe a couple years older than me, and I couldn't imagine living with a chronic headache like that. I sat down behind the nurse's station and hovered over the phone. I wanted to call Dean and ask him to come down and give his opinion, but I knew I shouldn't do it. That would be swerving far out of my lane into inappropriate territory, but I knew that if anyone could help her, it was him, and Dr. Foster would never ask him for help. They were sort of friends and sort of rivals, and Richard Foster would be much, much too proud to ask Dean for a second opinion. I cursed to myself, dialed his pager number, and hung up. He'd get the page and come when he could. I returned to her room, left her some water, made small talk, and as I went back to my station, I spotted Dean lingering in the hall with a mildly confused look on his face. I walked out and waved him down before one of the other nurses or doctors could ask him why he was lurking around. "I was wondering if it was you," he said, leaning up against the wall outside of Lynn's room. "I was hoping you could help with something." "Sure, no problem, but I have to admit I thought you were making a social call," I snorted. "I wouldn't page you if it weren't for work." "Fair enough." He glanced toward Lynn's door. "Is this about the patient in there?" "Her name's Lynn, 25, chronic headache." Who's her doc? Foster. He smirked. That asshole. He's got no clue what's going on with her. Hit her with every test imaginable already and still got nothing. You want me to take a look at her chart? His knowing smile pissed me off, and I had to take a breath before I answered. Yes, if you wouldn't mind. He shrugged. Anything for my partner in crime. I wanted to scream, but I forced a smile on my face. He knew how strange it was for a nurse to call in a doctor for a second opinion, and he'd be risking the wrath of Dr. Foster if he went in there and spoke with that girl, so I couldn't be too angry with him, even if that cocky smile pissed me off. He strode into Lynn's room and went into full-on doctor mode. Doctors have a way about them with patients, exuding a strange sort of calm, intense confidence, like nothing was beyond their expertise. I knew it was all bullshit, and every doctor cultivated that act, but it seemed to work on most people, including Lynn. She perked up a bit and smiled at him, answering his questions as he paged through her chart. I watched him run through a simple physical exam and assisted him, though he didn't really need my help. I caught him give me a tight smirk, and I wanted to smack that look off his face, but he was being good with Lynn, careful and thorough, and I didn't want to mess up his flow. And you said it's in only one part of your head? She nodded. Right side only, never moves, always the exact same spot. And you had a CT and an MRI, looks like? Dr. Foster said I'm all clear. Dean nodded and stroked his chin for a moment. Did he give you any indomethacin? Lynn shook her head, a little bewildered, and looked at me. I don't think so. Does that sound familiar? No, I said, frowning at Dean. It's not in her chart either. He stepped forward. Here, take my hand. Lynn hesitated, then took his hands again. Like this? He nodded. Push your thumb against my thumb. Right one only, please. She did that, and he seemed to grunt and nod. Now the left. Again she pressed, but a small smile slid across her lips. That felt harder, she said. He gave a slight nod and released her. Wait here, I'll be right back. I watched him leave the room, slightly bewildered. Where's he going? Lynn asked. I have no clue, I admitted. You said he's a good doctor, right? I shook my head. One of the best. I genuinely don't know what he's going for with this, though. I guess it can't hurt. She leaned back against her pillow and sighed. My head seriously pounding. We waited in silence for a few minutes, and I busied myself with meaningless straightening. 10 minutes slipped past, and I was ready to give up and leave when Dean came storming back in through her door with a big smile on his face and a small bottle of pills. Here you go, he said, plunking them down on the table beside Lynn's bed. What are those? I asked. Indomethacin, he said. It's like an older form of ibuprofen or Tylenol, something that's not really used all that often anymore, but it has one particularly unique quality that makes it perfect for you. I walked over, picked up the bottle, and peered at it. And what's that? I asked, taking his bait. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, he said. Lynn laughed. So it'll get straight to my head? More or less. I took off the pill cap and popped one into my hand. I hesitated, then held it out to Lynn. She took it and dry swallowed it without hesitation. Are you sure this'll work? I asked. I'm fairly sure she has what's called a hemicrania continua. It's a type of odd headache that persists on one side of the head and never quite goes away. They're rare, but usually not life-threatening, and best of all, they respond extremely well to indomethacin. Lynn perked up. Extremely well? As in, I think you'll start feeling better tomorrow, and if you keep taking the pills, the headache might never come back. She gaped at him. You're joking? I'm not, assuming I'm right, which I usually am. She laughed and stared at me, and I only shook my head. I've never heard of hemi-what's-it before. Hemicrania continua. Go ahead, look it up if you want. It's a real thing. I gave him a look. I trust you, Take the pills twice a day, he said, leaning toward Lynn. If you ever feel the headache come back, contact me and I'll write you another prescription for them. If you have what I think you have, they'll work. She stared at him for a second, then burst into tears. Dean took a step back, surprised and not sure how to respond. I laughed a little and sat on the edge of Lynn's bed, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said, sobbing and laughing at the same time. "It's just, I've had this headache for so long, and I never thought I'd actually get it to go away. Now I feel like I finally have a chance at a normal life. It's almost too much to bear." Dean smiled a little and patted her shoulder. "You'll be okay, I promise." I rolled my eyes at him. For such a charming, handsome man, he had a shitty bedside manner. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. "Doing my job." "Really, thank you," Lynn said, wiping her eyes with the sheets and sitting up straight. "When should I start to feel something?" "As soon as tonight, maybe tomorrow. Take a second pill with dinner and another with breakfast, and keep taking them until the bottle's gone, breakfast and dinner, twice per day." She paused for a moment and seemed to hang there, suspended between emotions. "And if it doesn't work?" Dean softened a bit. "If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. I won't give up." "Thank you." She curled up on herself and I stood, shaking my head. "You'll be okay." "I hope so." Dean nodded and inched toward the door. "I'll check on you tonight, okay? Make sure you're doing okay." "Thank you, Doctor." He slipped out of her room and lingered in the hall, checking his notes, although I knew he was waiting for me. "You'll be okay," I said again, smiling at her. "I'll be back soon." "Yeah." She grinned at me and leaned her head back. "I'll be okay." I followed Dean and caught up with him as he started to wander back toward the elevators. "That was quite the show you put on in there. What was with the thumb thing? Muscle weakness is a very rare side effect of hemicrania, and I had a feeling she'd present with it. I want to say you're clever, but I don't want to stroke your ego. No worries, you don't need to say a thing for me to be incredibly arrogant." I laughed and leaned my shoulder against him briefly. "Seriously, thanks for that. Let me know how she does. I have a feeling she'll recover just fine, though." He hesitated and turned toward me, head tilted to the side, and I stood close to him, alone in the shadows of the hallway. Somewhere nearby, I heard a monitor beep the rhythm of a heart, and voices echoed down toward us, sounding strangely happy, which wasn't common in a hospital. "You seemed sort of uncomfortable back there, you know." He laughed. "Crying girls are my kryptonite." "Oh, yeah? I'm not sure how to take that. I never know how to deal with them the right way." He shrugged. "I'm working on it. Normally, you say nice things. I'll keep that in mind." He reached out and touched my arm and left his hand there, lingering close. "Listen, I wanted to ask you something." "Yeah, what's that?" "Come over tonight for dinner." I bit the inside of my cheek. "Dinner? We can go over that thing we found. You know, the computer thing." He leaned closer and whispered, "The USB drive we stole." I held up a hand. "Yeah, thanks, I got it the first time." He beamed at me. "What do you say?" "I could eat dinner with you, I guess." "Perfect. I'm finished for the day, so I'll swing by later?" "When's your shift end?" I hesitated and looked away. I didn't want him to pick me up from the hospital, not because that was strange or because I didn't appreciate a ride, but because I wanted to go home and shower off the hospital before going to his place. It was an entirely vain reaction, and I was almost surprised by it. I shouldn't have cared if I went to his place in crappy scrubs, still covered in germs and blood, but for some reason I wanted to make a good impression. "That's okay, I'll come to you," I said. "How's 8 sound?" "Sounds great. I'll cook." He turned and walked to the elevator doors. "You cook?" "Damn right I do." He hit the call button and looked back at me. "You're in for a treat. I shook my head, smiling like an idiot, and awkwardly waved before turning and stalking back to the nurse's station. I sat down and hunched over the computer for a second, catching my breath and trying to make sense of what I felt back there. He shouldn't have been able to make me feel like that. I wanted to resist him, to keep things casual and professional between us, and yet I felt myself slipping down the path towards something more, starting to want to impress him, feeling like I wanted to spend time with him outside of a professional setting. That was dangerous. I'd spent so much of my adult life, ever since the accident, trying to avoid this sort of thing. I didn't want entanglements. Didn't want to feel close enough to someone that they might find out about me and realize that I'm broken. I don't want to lose even more than I've already lost, and something can't be taken away if you never have it to begin with. I knew how pathetic that was, but I'd gotten this far keeping the world at arm's length, and I didn't want to stop now. And yet I was already planning what I'd wear to his place, unable to help myself. 8 Dean, I texted Fiona my address, hit up the grocery store, and started cooking as soon as I got home. The smell of roasted chicken and vegetables filled my apartment as I hummed along to an old jazz record by Duke Ellington and drank a small glass of whiskey. I felt strangely nervous. I knew I shouldn't, since Fiona had been acting like the last thing she wanted to do was get involved with me, and yet I couldn't help myself. I kept thinking about the looks she gave me, about her lips parted slightly, her pretty eyes wide, the way she stood close, even the way she got angry, so quick and sharp. I couldn't help but think about how she'd taste, or the way she'd move her hips if I slipped my fingers between her legs, or the sound of her moans, or the way she'd bite my lip, or her pink nipples between my teeth. I couldn't help myself, even though I knew it didn't help a damn thing. She showed up right on time. The door buzzed, and I went to the intercom. "Come on in. Door's straight ahead." I opened the door and watched her walk toward me, a little smile on her lips, her hair down around her shoulders. She wore a pair of tight dark jeans and a black top that showed a hint of her breasts, and a small gold cross that nestled in her cleavage. I smiled a little and knew she was drawing my attention there, and didn't mind one bit. "Nice place," she said, looking around as we walked inside. "You did all this?" I shrugged. "Most of it's from vintage shops. Some of the art's real, though." She lingered in front of a large geometric canvas, a series of green, red, and yellow circles and triangles, with splotches of paint and mad dashes of lines and arcs weaving between them. It was modern and strange, and cost a goddamn ton of money, but I didn't like to admit that to people. She smiled a little and wandered through the rest of the downstairs, lingering in the kitchen, then standing in the living room. "Smells good," she said. "Roast chicken and vegetables. Hope you like it." "Sounds nice." She ran her hand over some books in my bookshelf, lingered over a group of small statues I'd gotten in a trip to Tibet, then turned to me. "This isn't what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Lots of metal. Industrial, maybe. Or that weird minimalist white thing you see on YouTube videos." I laughed and shook my head. I preferred a warmer interior design, lots of colors, mostly earth tones, and as many potted plants as I could stand to keep alive. I had several bookshelves, all of them packed with books and old DVDs I'd collected over the years, along with a big, comfortable leather couch and several pillows and throw blankets. Thanks, I guess, but no. I like to actually live in my home instead of act like it's a studio for content. She shrugged and nodded at the black staircase that led upstairs. "You have a second floor?" "Split level," I said. "Bedrooms up there." I tilted my head and smirked. "You want a tour of it?" She rolled her eyes. "No, thanks. This is strictly business." I shrugged. "Want a drink, at least?" "I'll take wine." I laughed, got her a glass, then pointed toward the kitchen table. "Take a seat. I'll bring out dinner and we'll get started." She sipped her wine and watched as I got the chicken out, checked its temperature, and started plating everything. I'd made this dish more than a few times and had mastered it by now, but there was always that moment before you served it to someone when you're not sure if it's good or not, and maybe it's garbage. You couldn't be sure until they took that first bite. I put her plate down in front of her, then took my seat. I watched, pretending like I wasn't watching, as she dug in, and seemed to enjoy it. "Okay," she said, nodding at the food. "I like this, but we're supposed to be here on business." I smiled, very pleased the food came out good, and stood up. "Fair enough. Hold on a second." I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table, opened it up next to us, and plugged in the USB drive. So I grabbed a lot of crap off her computer, and I've been going through it little by little. I opened up a folder and clicked on an Excel spreadsheet. This struck me as interesting, but I have no clue what it means. She squinted at it. Clearly some kind of financial document. I agree. But what's it say? She shook her head and absently ate as she scanned through the columns of letters and numbers. I'd barely been able to parse any of it since bringing it home, and I hoped she'd be able to understand at least some of it better than I did. "I'm having flashbacks to math class," she muttered. I laughed and ate while she grumbled to herself and went through the sheet. I watched her chew on her fingernails, stab her chicken with her fork like she wanted to kill it a second time, and finish her glass of wine in record time. I topped her up and kept quiet, letting her concentrate as she went through a few more spreadsheets, then started clicking around the random folders. She grunted when a bunch of photos opened. "You didn't have to grab these." I copied everything. I shrugged and gestured with my whiskey glass. "We were hurrying, couldn't really discriminate." She laughed and squinted. "Oh, wow, looks like she had a lot of fun on her vacation last year. Right? Looks like a nice one too. Seriously, 5-star hotel at least. Is this on some island?" That was my guess. Good for her. She clicked into another folder and returned to angrily skimming. I knew we wouldn't get far. I mean, we were both smart people, but neither of us were accountants, and I didn't have any damn experience reading through financial documents, much less finding incriminating evidence inside one. Fiona didn't seem to be having much more luck than I did, which gave me an odd sense of pride. At least I wasn't a total moron. "I give up," she said, leaning back in her chair and tossing her fork down with a clatter. "What the hell were we thinking? That's all nonsense. I know how you feel. Maybe we can blackmail the truth from her? You know, use those vacation pictures against her?" I laughed, shaking my head. "I don't think she'll spill the beans about her illegal relationship with mobsters over some mediocre bikini pics. You don't know that. She could be extremely self-conscious. Sorry, but good try. I like it when you're ruthless." She sighed and sipped her wine with a sour expression on her face. "It feels like every time we get close, we're still left grasping at straws." She's not stupid, immoral, and an asshole. Definitely both of those things, but not stupid. "So, what do we do?" "Well," I said, sipping my whiskey, "maybe you could tell me your favorite movie." She stared at me, a little taken off guard. "I'm not sure what that has to do with Maria." "Nothing, really. I'm just curious." She rolled her eyes. "Come on." "You ate my delicious roast chicken. The least you can do is answer some very simple questions about yourself." "I thought we were here for business." "We were." I gestured at the computer. "You gave it a shot. We're both spreadsheet illiterate, and now it's the pleasure part of the evening." She gave me an annoyed look for a few seconds before relaxing back into her chair, arms crossed, wine glass dangling from her fingers. "Okay, I'll admit, the chicken is really good." "I'm glad. So I'll play along for a little bit. But you have 10 minutes, okay?" "Plenty of time." I finished my whiskey and refilled the glass. "Favorite movie?" "Sixth Sense." I arched an eyebrow. "Really?" "Really. I like the twist. Favorite album?" "Depends, but I guess right now it's Parachutes by Coldplay." Remember when Coldplay was good? I snorted. I remember. What about you? Joshua Tree by U2. Beautiful, another band that used to be good and now is kind of... She spread her hands out. Jump the Shark? Exactly. I grinned. Favorite TV show? Easy, House. Weird, that's mine. And The Wire. I think every doctor loves House. Probably. We all like to think we're as smart as he is, but the truth is, nobody is as smart as he is, because he doesn't exist. Wow, that's almost admitting that you're not a genius doctor. I held up a hand. Easy there, not going quite that far. She smiled and tapped a finger on her glass. Why do you live in Philadelphia? That's an interesting question. You're a smart guy, young, single doctor. You could live anywhere. Why here? I glanced down at the table for a second and composed my thoughts. I didn't know how I'd say this without sounding awful, how I'd explain that Philly was the last place my family landed, back before my dad had his heart attack and lived out his last years as a ghost of the man he used to be, a specter still haunting my life. Philly was the first place that felt like home, even if nowhere was really home, not when I moved around so much. My mother lives here, I said, and I like the city. It's walkable. She tilted her head. That's true. What about you? Why here? Grew up in the suburbs, so I guess Philly's always been it for me. I moved around a lot as a kid. Dad was a military man, and he dragged us all over the country. Must have been hard. Sure, parts of it were. Sometimes I wondered why he had a family. She raised an eyebrow at that. What do you mean? He was distant, controlling, demanding, borderline abusive. I should have said straight-up abusive fuckface, but I couldn't bring myself to go all the way. Wasn't a pleasant man to be around. Sometimes I wondered why he had a family. Huh. Is that something you want? I shrugged. I think so. Wife, children, white picket fence. That's the dream, right? Sure, she said, looking away with an odd expression on her face. Children, house in the suburbs, the dream. Do you want kids? She jerked her arm a little, almost as if I pinched her shoulder. Her wine glass tipped from her fingers and spilled all over the keyboard of my laptop. Oh, shit, she said, standing up and knocking the chair back. I jumped up and grabbed the computer. I went to turn it off and flipped it upside down to drain, and hesitated, staring at the spreadsheet that was open on the screen. The numbers still didn't make sense, not exactly, but I noticed a pattern, a few recurring numbers and letters that were scattered all throughout the space, something I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't flipped it around, but I couldn't think about that too much. I turned the laptop and wiped as much of the wine off with a towel as I could before turning it upside down to dry out. Fiona paced back and forth, wringing her hands and making a horrified face. It's okay, I said. It'll be okay. It'll dry out. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, she said, shaking her head. I'm so stupid and clumsy. I'm so sorry. I'll buy you a new one. Seriously, it's okay. I laughed a little and took a step toward her. You must really hate kids, huh? Her face turned red. I blinked in surprise as she gulped down the last swallow of wine in her glass and turned away from me. I should go, she said. Wait, hold on. Really, I'm sorry, but I should go. Fiona. She marched to the door. I followed, but not too close, as she pulled it open and stepped outside. I wanted to tell her to stop, to grab her wrist and pull her against me, but she didn't hesitate as she hurried away. I sighed, watched her step out the main door and onto the sidewalk, then shut my apartment. Damn, I said softly. Something about kids set her off. I wasn't sure why or what exactly it meant, but something about children put her on edge. I walked back into the kitchen and stared at the laptop. I could picture the spreadsheet again, and the pattern remained in my mind, but the letters and numbers were gone. I couldn't risk turning it back on, Not until the alcohol dried out and dripped out of the computer, which meant I'd have to try to hold on to whatever I saw until it was safe to boot back up. In the meantime, I cleaned up, saved the leftovers, and tried to figure out how the hell I fucked that up so badly. 9 Fiona. Unfortunately, I didn't die of embarrassment as soon as I left Dean's apartment that night, so I spent the next shift awkwardly trying to avoid him. It's not too hard. He doesn't come to my floor often unless he has a patient, and fortunately he doesn't have any nearby. I drift from room to room, doing my usual thing, keeping half an eye out on the hallway for any hint of him. Mary noticed, of course. Bless her heart, but that lady can't seem to keep herself to herself, no matter how hard she tried, although I sort of doubted that she tried at all. "What's with you this evening?" she asked, as I sat down after checking in on a patient and kept craning my neck to stare down the hallway. "What?" Nothing." I leaned forward to stare at the monitor. She made a face. "Don't give me that. Something's up. You're jumpy." "I'm not jumpy. You're sitting there, ready to get up and run away at any second. Don't try to tell me you're not jumpy." "I'm fine." I took a deep breath and gave her a look. "Really, I'm fine." She didn't believe me, of course. The woman was a professional gossip first and a nurse second, which meant she could smell someone trying to hide something from a mile away. She leaned toward me, eyebrows raised with a look of pure innocence in her eyes, and took on a concerned tone. "You can tell me if it's one of the doctors," she said. "You've been spending a lot of time with Dr. Corse." I grimaced. "It's got nothing to do with him." "But it's something." I stood up abruptly and glared at her. "Mary, I swear, if you—" I didn't get to finish that sentence because the monitor began beeping like crazy, and I shifted into crisis mode. That was how it happened in a hospital. 1 second, you're talking with a coworker, minding your own business, going through the motions of a perfectly normal evening, and the next, you're sprinting to a patient's room, ready to save a life. He was an older man, presented with tachycardia and pale lips. We gave him oxygen, got his heart settled, but the doctors wanted to keep him overnight for observation. He seemed to improve throughout the day, but for some reason his heart decided to give out. I didn't think much. My training took over as we got the crash cart and worked on him, Mary moving with practiced precision, knowing what I'd need and when I'd need it as the doctor got called in. I managed to bring the man back in under 2 minutes, which was good, and we spent the next 10 minutes stabilizing him as the doctor ripped through his chart, trying to figure out what the hell happened. It was strange, working a job that teetered on the edge at all times. I saved a life, brought a man back from death, and I wouldn't win any awards for it, wouldn't get any thanks, any bonuses, any medals, only the satisfaction of knowing that if I hadn't acted when I did, that man would be gone. I returned to my station, sweaty and trembling from the adrenaline. Mary put a hand on my shoulder and sat down next to me, leaning back in her chair and closing her eyes. "Funny how that goes," she said. "I know. You did good in there. I think he'd be gone without you." "Thanks, Mary. Same goes for you. We make a good team." She laughed and stretched. "Why don't you go and get cleaned up? You look exhausted. I saw you've been pulling a lot of late shifts and overtime, huh?" "Can't help myself. I guess I just love it here at Mercy." She laughed again and waved me on. "Go ahead, get cleaned up. I'll hold down the fort." I stood and nodded my thanks. "I'll be back soon. I appreciate it." The hospital seemed quiet as I made my way toward the staff lounge bathroom nearby. It always felt that way after an emergency, the wild, incredible intensity of saving a life, of doing everything possible to keep a person alive, contrasts with the otherwise mundane existence of a hospital. Fact was, a lot people healed on their own. We kept them stable, but the human body is pretty amazing about recovering. For the most part, we make people comfortable, make sure they're not getting worse, and give them time. Some need aggressive intervention, many don't. That's not exciting or flashy or loud, and so mostly my days are spent in quiet boredom, punctuated by moments of incredible, intense action. I reached the lounge and put my hand on the knob, but heard someone call my name. I looked over and spotted Maria coming toward me. She had a placid smile on her face and wore a smart, comfortable black pantsuit. I went completely still and felt my blood run cold with fear. Saving a life didn't make me freeze up. When a man's existence hung on the balance, I did what I had to do and didn't think twice. But staring down the barrel of Maria's politician smile, I wanted to turn and bolt, but couldn't make my legs move. "Fiona, how are you?" she asked, stopping nearby. "Doing fine," I said. "How are you?" She shrugged. "Not too bad. Funny running into you again. Weren't you just up on my floor recently?" "Oh, right," I said, pretending like I forgot and doing a horrible job. "That's funny. Of course, you were with Dr. Corse last time. How is he doing? He's a very busy man, or so I hear." I shook my head. "I wouldn't know. We don't work together often. And yet the two of you made a visit to my office the other night." My mouth fell open, and she kept smiling at me like nothing was the matter. I felt a scream sit on the edge of my lips and nearly force itself out, but I pushed it back and swallowed it down. I smiled back like my life depended on it, like she'd open up her jaws and eat me whole if I couldn't pretend like this was no big deal. Maria was a snake. She had to have a little reptile in her if she wanted to be able to reach the heights she'd reached. People didn't become the head administrator of a large urban hospital without a little bit of ruthlessness in them. She had to play the game, the political game, and managed to win more often than not, and that made her a scary, formidable person. I hadn't thought about it before, and I wish I had. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said. "We were on that floor to—" "I have a camera on my bookshelf." The words came out, and her smile faltered, only a little bit, but enough to show the rage lurking behind her fake grin. "It's motion-activated." "Oh," I said. "Right. Okay, I can explain that." She stepped closer. I wanted to step back, but I was too close to the door. I looked around like someone might come and save me, but the hallway was empty, and the building seemed almost cavernous and immense. "I want you to think very carefully before you answer me, Fiona. I want you to take a deep breath and think about this." She stared at me, eyes dead and cold. "What did you find?" I took a deep breath, like instructed, and let it out. "Nothing," I said. "We were looking—" "Don't lie to me," she hissed, and in that moment I realized what was happening. She was scared. She didn't know what we found, and that freaked her out. If she was innocent, there was no way we'd be having a conversation right now. She would simply show the video evidence to HR and have me fired on the spot, and maybe press criminal charges. Instead, she was worried about what we found, and she hadn't done any of that yet because she probably thought we'd release any damning documents if she tried to get rid of us. I almost laughed. I couldn't help myself. I thought she had the upper hand here, but in fact I still had some cards up my sleeve. "I'm not lying," I said, trying to talk to her like she was an unruly patient. "We went in, looked at your financial records, copied everything from your laptop, and then we left. Not much in there." Her eyes went wide, and her smile fell away. "You stole from my laptop?" "Oh, well, of course," I said, shrugged like it was no big deal. "You keep your password in your desk drawer." Her face drained of color and went a strange, sickly pale. "You copied my documents from my computer." "I'm sorry, I guess I should have mentioned that right away." I shrugged a little and beamed at her. "Is there anything else I can do for you, Maria?" She seemed to gather herself and managed to stand up straight. Her face was still pale, but the anger slipped back into her eyes, and I caught a glimpse of the python there wrapped around her heart, waiting to slither around my throat and squeeze. "I want you to understand something," she said, speaking softly. "You broke into my office. You stole documents from my computer. You should be in handcuffs right now. And yet I'm not, which is strange, don't you think? The only reason you're not is that I feel bad for you. I get it. Dr. Corse is very convincing, but whatever he said to make you think you should follow him, I'd really think twice about that. If you come clean and tell me what you took— It wasn't his idea, I said, shaking my head. It was mine. She blinked rapidly. Excuse me? I know what you're doing, Maria, and I'm going to prove it. You stupid girl, she hissed. I faced her, gathering my courage. If I were you, I'd get the hell out of this hospital before we come forward with everything. Do you understand? That's not going to happen. Then I guess we'll see how this all shakes out, won't we? She stood still, glaring at me, then shook her head once and turned. You're making a mistake. You have no clue who's involved here. I know more than you think. I opened the door to the lounge. Have a nice day, Maria. She walked off without another word. I watched her go for a moment, then stumbled into the lounge, found the bathroom, and puked into the toilet. I knelt there, breathing hard, sweat dripping down my back and under my arms. I felt horrible, like someone scraped the inside of my stomach with a steel wool sponge. I got to my feet, splashed some water on my face, and looked at myself in the mirror. Bags hung under my eyes, and my skin was blotchy from stress. She knew, and she hadn't done anything yet, which meant she was guilty. But we couldn't prove it yet. And now it was a race to see who could make something happen first. Maria would try to discredit us as soon as she could, and when that happened, we needed to be ready with the proof that would take her down. I nodded to myself, then turned and went to find Dean. 10 Dean, I was so deep into the spreadsheets that I didn't hear her knock at first. I jumped when she banged on my door again and stood up, only getting halfway there before she threw it open and came inside. Fiona looked freaked as hell as she stared at me. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot, and she trembled slightly, like a cold breeze blew through the window. I took a step toward her, reaching out, but she flinched away. Are you okay? I asked. Maria knows. Those 2 words made my heart stop. What? She came to me. She said she has a camera in her office. She knows, Dean. She knows. I didn't move and stared at her for what felt like forever. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of this, and I had a hard time fitting all the pieces together. Maria knew that we broke into her office, but that didn't make any sense. If she had proof that we were in there and that we stole from her, then she should have gone right to the police and gotten us arrested. I gently moved toward Fiona again and steered her over to a chair. She sat without much resistance, and I sat in the chair next to her. I leaned over and put my hands on her legs, staring into her eyes. Tell me exactly what she said. She gave me a rundown of their conversation as best she could. When she finished, I stood and paced across the tight room before stopping near the desk, hand resting on the edge of my laptop. She's afraid, I said. Fiona nodded. I think so too, which means I'm right. I laughed a little, shaking my head. God damn her, she's clever. What are you talking about? I looked back at her and hesitated. I've been staring at the numbers since last night. I thought we agreed it's all gibberish, and it still is, but I started to notice some patterns. I turned the laptop toward her and pointed at the first row. 3 letters, always 3. And look, you see some of them occur over and over again, see that? She nodded. LMR and DCK keep coming up. A few others, too. Each series of letters is linked with a few different numbers in these columns, and the numbers and letters seem totally random, right? As far as I can tell, but they can't be. That'd make no sense. I nodded and opened up the hospital website. I clicked through a few links, then showed her a single website with a simple heading. She squinted and frowned. Charity? She asked. Donors, I corrected. This is a list of the most prominent donors, the ones that want to be named anyway. I scrolled down through a list of wealthy, absurdly prominent people and stopped at a name, highlighting it. Leticia Ramirez. She frowned a little bit. So what, LMR? I bet her middle name is something like Missy. She snorted. You think that spreadsheet is a list of donors? I scrolled down again and stopped at another name. Derek Keller. I bet his middle name is Chris. And there are a few more. John Marble, Heather Wilson, Len Ark, Faye Ranger, Jen Watts, Corrado Blanche. Each of those names has a corresponding three-letter sequence on that sheet, and the numbers in the columns are all pretty damn big. Big enough to get on the website? I nodded with a grin. Damn right they are. Here, look at Leticia. I found her first donation. I think what we're looking at is money in and out. See, she first donated $50,000, then it gets spent in small chunks until it's all gone. Interesting, Fiona said, seeming to warm up to the topic. So this tracks money then? Exactly, but there's a catch. See, look here. I pointed at a three-letter sequence, VSL. All of these donations are larger than the smaller payouts, but the sheet claims the donations were all spent. Money's missing. Her eyes went wide. Holy shit, this is it, right? It might be, I said, but this has to be it. Someone's making charitable donations to the hospital, but the money's not getting completely accounted. Some of it goes missing. Big chunks, actually. Almost all of it. She sucked in a breath. This has to be what she was talking about with those guys. I think you're right. We don't have proof right now, but there has to be some way to find it. She turned to me, and a strange, bright excitement crossed her expression. She got to her feet and threw her arms around me, pulling me against her in a tight hug. Her body was warm, and she smelled like hospital soap and fresh-cut flowers, and I wasn't shy in letting my hands linger on her hips. You did it, she said. God, Maria's going to be so pissed. She pulled back, but we stayed there, inches away from each other. I shifted toward her and felt my heart do a soft flip in my chest as I leaned closer. She didn't pull away like I expected, and when my lips met hers, she sucked in a breath and neither of us moved. Our lips pressed together, pleasure flooding my body, until she kissed me, and I kissed her back, and I held her tight against me. That kiss was wild and triumphant and crazy, and I knew I might never get another like it in my life. But she pressed herself tight against me, and I didn't let her go. Slowly, our lips parted, and she took a breath, blinking a little, her mouth still so close to mine. We shouldn't do this, she said. You might be right. But you're not going to stop, are you? No, I'm not, and I don't think you want me to. I don't know what I want. She pulled away but didn't leave. Why did you run away last night? She grimaced and stared down at the floor like I'd spilled cold water down her back. I don't want to talk about that. I understand, it's just, you can tell me. Yeah, and what, you'll fix me? She looked back up and I saw that spark of anger again.